Alright, so let's get this project started. We are going to basically be creating a faux stain. So by using a baby wipe, as you can see, I am spreading some brown paint across the face of this pine board. And I only use 2 baby wipes to create this stained effect. So the first baby wipe is used to apply the paint, and the second baby wipe is used to spread it out and just kind of push the paint into the grain more and also pull some of it off. So as you can see, I am applying paint with the wipe here, and you want to go with the grain, getting all of the sides and the whole entire face of the board covered, and then you can also do the back side like I'm doing now. So just get the whole board covered with paint, and then if you want to kind of create more of a stained look, take a clean wet wipe like I'm doing here and push the paint almost like you're using pressure to push the paint into the board further. And it also helps to kind of pull off excess paint and gives it more of a true stained look. So now we're going to switch gears and work on some of the 3D pieces. So we're going to paint the pieces right inside the frame that they come in, and you don't have to worry about getting outside the edges. So just take a look at how I am lightly dabbing a very small amount of paint with a makeup sponge. And the best way to go about this is to kind of dab a little paint on your sponge, tap it off on a piece of paper before applying it to your wood pieces, and just go up and down. You can kind of play around with different ways to apply the paint, and just experiment, because worst case scenario, you can repaint over top of anything that you don't care for after it dries. You can use multiple colors to kind of blend and add highlights or shadows. Just kind of use this sponge as a different kind of paintbrush. And speaking of paintbrushes, you can use those in place of the sponge or after sponging if you want to add little details. The thing you want to look out for when using a paintbrush or a sponge is you don't want paint to seep into the cracks or over the edges of your 3D pieces, because it makes it look kind of sloppy, and if you fill in the cracks before you push these pieces out of the frame, it can make it hard to get those pieces out because it almost glues itself to the frame. So just be aware of how much paint you're using and make sure that you aren't completely filling in the cracks. So here you can see I am gently pushing the pieces out. So the rose bouquet comes out in one piece. You can actually see where the little tabs are that are keeping each piece inside the frame. If you flip the frame upside down and look at it from the back side, you can see the tiny little tabs, so that way you know exactly where you need to push. So when you push the pieces out of the frame, just take it slow, be careful. You can also use some sort of a tool to kind of pinpoint on the small pieces where exactly you want to push on. So here I'm painting in the words, same kind of method. You just take a tiny bit of paint, dab it on. What I did here was I blended a little bit of green with some cream and kind of had it be not a solid plain color, but a faded, blended shade of green, lots of different shades of green, so that it wasn't just flat one color. But you can do it however you want and in whatever color you want. I would just recommend for the elements that are going to go on your board, that they should be a lighter or a darker color than the background color of the board. So you wouldn't want to use brown on top of brown. That's why I chose kind of a lighter shade of green, and a cream colored, like almost pinkish tone for the flower pot face. So just make sure that the colors are contrasting against the board, whether they're lighter or darker. And if you accidentally paint them the wrong color, and then you go to place it on your board, and if it doesn't show up the way that you want, you can always paint over it. It's super simple. I love these kinds of projects because they are so forgiving. So you can see here I'm using the back of a paintbrush to do what I was explaining earlier, where you can use a tool to kind of help guide those pieces out. So just get all the pieces out on the table. Make sure that you don't lose the little dots that go to the eyes. And just carefully get them set aside and bring your baseboard where you can start working on putting some of these pieces out. And we're just basically going to lay them out on the board, because the last step is going to be before gluing these pieces on, you want to wait and just get all the pieces laid out and then put your stencil on. So don't start gluing those pieces until you know exactly where your stencil is going to go. So see, I'm just kind of laying out the pieces, getting everything in the position that I want, and then I'm going to apply my stencil. So to do that, you're going to flip it upside down like I did here and take off the backing paper, which is the gridded lines. Then you're going to flip it over, stick it down just like a piece of tape, and just really rub it in there good. And I took that little flower pot, the flat part of the flower pot, and just scraped it. You could use like a credit card or anything else to just scrape it down. And then once it's properly secured to the board, you're going to take off the transfer tape, which is this top layer that I just peeled off there. And I like to use that just as kind of a little protection piece to avoid dripping paint on there. So it doesn't hurt to just kind of stick that on and use it to protect your board. So you're going to use a sponge just like you did for the 3D pieces and lightly tap it on. Again, you want to offload some of that paint in the sponge before you apply it to your board or to your stencil. So don't just dip it in the paint and then go directly to your stencil. You want to kind of and that's notating to not use a hairdryer to dry these pieces. You do not want to use a hairdryer for a stencil, so you can use it for the wood pieces. Anywho, now I am working on getting some glue for the flower pot pieces. So there's that backing piece that's going to go on or behind the face of the flower pot, and just glue those pieces together. That's what is going to hold the bouquet of roses onto the board, because you don't actually have to glue that to your board. So if you ever wanted to swap it out and actually put like some fresh posies, you could definitely stick some other kinds of flowers in that little vase. So you don't have to glue the roses there. You can if you want. Just kind of get it into position the way that you want. And then glue that right to your board for the vase. And you want to press and hold for like 5 to 10 seconds. The kind of glue that I use, it works really well. It's just a regular super glue, household super glue, but you do want to press and hold it for 5 to 10 seconds. Some super glues set almost immediately, but some take a little bit to press and hold. I'm doing a second coat of paint here, so I like to bounce back and forth. As you can see, I barely ever just stop and wait for the paint to dry. I'm usually like working in some sort of a process. Okay, I'm going to glue this while I'm waiting for my first layer to dry. And then while that glue is drying, I'm going to do the second coat of paint. So I kind of work just in a flow, if you will. And while that second coat of paint is drying on the stencil, because you want to let it air dry, like I said, no hair dryers for stencils, at least not adhesive stencils like that one is. You can work on gluing your other pieces onto the board while your stencil dries. And I used a pair of tweezers for applying the dots in the eyes and the small pieces. I just find that it's easier to hold onto those smaller pieces with a pair of tweezers. I have glued my fingers more times than I can count. So tweezers will help you to kind of avoid that. And if you just apply the piece where you want it with the tweezers and then press down with your other hand, that is a good way of doing that. The big piece though is a little too big to be able to use tweezers, so I just carefully grabbed that with my hand. You do want to be careful with these words because some of those pieces are very thin. So to avoid breaking it, just be very careful. Although if you do accidentally break a piece, it's not the end of the world. You can glue it back together and you won't even notice once it's glued onto the board. So once your stencil is all dry, you can have fun with peeling it off. Just like I did. Don't worry about if it breaks or rips in half or into 10 pieces. It doesn't matter because it's just going to be trash. You cannot reuse those stencils. And then you just take a weeding tool, or if you don't have a weeding tool, you can use a toothpick, which is provided in the kits. And use those little tools, just some sort of a fine pick, to pull out the insides of the letters like the E's and the A's and the O. And that's basically it. You can add little details if you want, but I hope you had fun and enjoyed this project. I'm sure it turned out beautiful.